Yeah. Well, the other thing that concerns me here, getting over to like the budgetary stuff, is this also took a while to like settle in for me and realize. But I do think that House of the Dragon, particularly in season 2, the narrative was harmed by budget constraints in a way that I don't think Game of Thrones kind of ever has. The budget constraints you could feel in season 1 a little more tangibly of the original Game of Thrones, I think.
Yeah, they didn't know how to make that kind of show. It was very notable early on. They made it anyway. They did really good character writing and relationships and stuff.
They did, and the scope was still there. And I think the trade-off you could feel in the early seasons of Game of Thrones was we are maybe going to sacrifice some effects, some spectacle. We're going to do some Shakespearean off-stage battles stuff and just kind of cut in after the aftermath to tell us what happened. And instead, they put those resources into sets. And I think that's flipped around with House of the Dragon now. And the choice has been, we are going to cut corners on sets and locations in order to do up the dragon stuff and CGI as well and as big and fancy as possible. And I think that is a very big mistake now in hindsight.
I mean, I would say that the one thing that I can really give this show at this point is that the dragon sequences are good and they work. And that would have been a question mark and does seem to be, to some extent, what the show is based around. All the highlights of season 2 are dragon related for me. So
yeah,
I understand the logic maybe here. You know, all the big memeable moments are going to be dragon stuff. And the story demands that to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, and beyond that logic, I mean, I guess taking it a little further is if you fuck up a dragon image, that is going to be instantly memeable.
Yeah.
In a way that what I'm talking about, it just having too many scenes inside Dragonstone, that is not as easily graspable, as easily memeable, mockable, whatever. And it does feel like you can get around this for a while because it even took me through the whole season to figure out what exactly was bothering me about it. Because the movie or the show still does look really expensive, scene to scene. Like
right.
That.
But I mean, they shot like several hours worth of Harrenhal material. And It seems like, well, we built the set. We're going to shoot Harrenhal. It's going to be a major place that we spend most of the time here this season. Not too much happens in Harrenhal, really. You could have done 2 episodes in Harrenhal and done plenty, I think.
And we could have gone back to River Run with the Tully Boy to get something there. We could have spread it out. Damon could have been going to different places around there to visit people instead of always having them come to him and meeting him in the same, either under the tree in the yard or in the dining room. And that is, it's not immediately ruinous, but I think it's also a factor. It contributes to the feeling we were talking about last time. That about not understanding the narrative priorities of the show and like the stuff that it jumps over very quickly versus the stuff it really settles in and spends too much time on. It's like, I think this is the reason why we ended up getting 4 or 5 scenes of Corlys talking to his bastard son on the same dock set and having more or less the same interaction with him.
Those all feel like they were shot the same series of days too, you know. It's like we're getting all our dock scenes, you know. Yeah, maybe. And I never know quite how this works with television with different directors for episodes. But when they clearly shot everything at once, you know, in one location, I mean, it's especially something like this, which is essentially an 8-hour film, you know.
Yeah.
Something that is like planned this explicitly in advance, beat to beat. I imagine. I mean, well, it has to be for the CGI, right? I think the writing actually was the problem here, to be honest. I think you can do what they did with the sets, and it can work. I think season 1 of Game of Thrones does a pretty good job of it. But, you know, they just ran out of shit for these guys to do at Dragonstone. So you have endless scenes of Rhaenyra being like, I'm so bored of being at Dragonstone. I wish I could leave Dragonstone. And it's just like, yes, I agree. You're right. You should leave Dragonstone.
But I don't know. Like even the first season of Game of Thrones, to me, never felt like there was anywhere where the story wanted to go that it was avoiding. And
it's true. I mean, but the Red Keep is so interesting a location, and we're just learning it and seeing, like, you can do a lot of scenes there, and it's not going to feel dull because, well, there's interesting shit to happen there. All the scenes with Littlefinger and Cersei and Robert, these are all good scenes. Doesn't matter that they're in the same location.
Yeah. Well, and Winterfell is a pretty interesting location.
Yes,
and,
all of it. Learning the world is very fun. Obviously, that's one of the main appeals of Game of Thrones.
But when it's time to go to the Wall, we'll go to the Wall and see the Wall. When it's time to go for Tyrion to go be locked up in the Vale for a while, we'll go there, and we'll have exterior scenes of them hiking through the hills and all that. And if half of the scenes of that season on like the Daenerys side had involved her like staying in the same tent where her brother gets the crown, for example, that's what this would feel like.
That's a good point. Yeah.
They were willing to take her outside so much.
Yeah, you never feel like you're repeating scenes with those guys. With oh my god, I forgot the name of the barbarians. The
Dothraki.
The Dothraki. Oh my god! Wow. So that you're right. It does feel very. Every scene with them is in a different place. Even if it's just a different outside area, it does feel like they're moving around and doing shit. Well, this is just, I think, well-made stuff, I think. I mean, you have a great Dragonstone set. Let's shoot the Dragonstone set. I get that. But, it was more active. Even as a famously low-budget season, this season 1 was.
Yeah. And season 2 of that show, the budget's going up, but you can still tell a big difference in the polish and the money in the big climatic battle of Blackwater at the end of the second season versus the battle at the Wall in season 4 or any of the later
they start just having an open checkbook essentially. 3 and 4 around then. 2 still.
But even with that, season 2, it's like, well, now we're going to be going through the Riverlands. Now we're going to go to see Dragonstone, which we hadn't seen in the first season. Now we're going to go beyond the Wall, and it felt like, and we're going to see the Iron Islands, and it's never hesitating to show us new locations because their budget for sets is very large. And maybe it helps that the dragons were still small enough at that point. And they sidelined the wolves to a degree. People have people especially have complained about that. I think that's a trade-off that was definitely worth having. And House of the Dragon now has gotten backwards, and it contributes to this feeling of running in place. Even as we're moving past some stuff too quickly, we're also just one of the big assets here is this big expansive world. And we seem confined to too few rooms within that world.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the philosophical approach is, I guess, being more dragons. I don't know if that's a philosophical approach, but the decision they made is we're going to amp up the dragons. You would agree that those are the best scenes, right? Like those are the most exciting moments. And well, I mean, obviously the most exciting moments, but I don't know. Would you say that they are net negative, perhaps? If this is where all the money goes? Yeah.
Because I think you're totally right that it is part of the promise of this premise is that we're going back to the time when dragons were running wild. And so
fighting everyone.
Dragons being front in the middle of the screen a lot more does come with this territory. You need to do that. I just think another big part of the appeal and the promise of Game of Thrones is this is the show where they spare no expense. And if you start cutting corners, then you are undermining the central appeal of the show more than you might think initially, and more than the audience might realize initially. But I think it's having an effect, a deleterious effect over time.
That is the Zaslav reputation for HBO is the watching the purse strings a lot more closely, which is I mean, if this wasn't Game of Thrones, they probably would have canceled this by now as an expensive show. But it's one of their big IPs, so they're going to keep making these. If they're doing it on the cheap, that could be problems. That could definitely sort of befoul the franchise in a way the volume kind of has for Star Wars television shows, maybe.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me. And I mean, maybe the original Game of Thrones got lucky with some of the stuff because it existed before the volume. And so just shooting outside it was just before the time where shooting outside was a cheaper option than doing incredible CGI stuff with dragons. And And now it's flipped around, and the CGI is cheaper than taking everybody outside.
But still not cheap. It's still gonna hamstring your budget, probably.
Yeah. But that's what you can't. I just don't think you can do Game of Thrones and be sparing expenses. That is now it's too ingrained.
I think they're going to try, man. I think that's going to be the move.